I never thought I'd see an SUV sink into a front lawn like it was being swallowed by a swamp monster. But there I was, sipping coffee on my porch, watching Karen's over-polished tank of a vehicle vanish half a foot into my grass like a marsh had opened beneath her tires. Her screams echoed across the street as she slammed the door and stormed up my driveway, furious and muddy. But she had no idea that I had built that trap just for her, and the best part? Every inch of it was perfectly legal. Life in our neighborhood used to be the picture of peaceful suburbia. I'd bought the house 3 years ago with the intent to work from home, enjoy a bit of quiet, and maybe grow the kind of lawn that old men nod at approvingly as they stroll by. The type of grass so lush it looked Photoshop. And for a while it was exactly that. My lawn was my pride and joy. I had a whole system: morning watering, afternoon trims, and zero tolerance for dandelions. But then Karen moved in down the street, and my serene little green paradise turned into a war zone. Karen was impossible to ignore. Her voice hit octaves most dogs couldn't handle, and her SUV had all the subtlety of a freight train in a library. She claimed she wasn't like other Karens, which, of course, meant she was worse. She started parking on my lawn within her first week in the neighborhood, citing emergency school runs or quick stops. It wasn't just a tire over the edge, it was the entire passenger side of her SUV, half buried in my yard like it belonged there. I tried to be civil at first. I put up a polite little sign that said, "Please don't park on the grass." She laughed at it the first time and knocked it over the second. That was our first real interaction. She said, "You're really gonna cry over a patch of grass, sweetie?" I should have known right then what kind of war this would become. I brought it up with the HOA, expecting some level of authority or common sense. They shrugged it off. What I didn't know yet was that Karen was on the board. It explained a lot. It also meant I'd have to get creative. My friends told me to let it go. "You'll stress yourself out," they said. But I don't let things go. Especially when someone keeps digging ruts into the thing I've spent months perfecting. It wasn't just grass anymore. It was principle. It was a rainy Wednesday when everything changed. I was making breakfast and heard the engine roar outside. Karen, like always, had barreled up the curb. But this time, the ground was soft. Too soft. I watched from the window as her rear tires spun, flinging globs of sod and mud backward like a blender without a lid. Her face twisted into disbelief as the vehicle stopped moving entirely. She got out, high heels sinking into the muck, and started screaming at the lawn like it had personally betrayed her. I stepped outside and just looked at her, the rain pattering down between us. "Your grass ruined my car," she said, as if I had conspired with Mother Nature to sabotage her tires. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I just watched. Because in that exact moment something clicked in my mind. A perfect, terrible idea. If she wanted to treat my lawn like a parking lot, then maybe I needed to give her a parking lot experience she'd never forget. One that came with hidden cost. One that would sink her, literally. And the best part? It would all be by the book. The next day, I started researching. Landscaping loopholes, HOA bylaws, city ordinances. Turns out, as long as it wasn't a structural change or a safety hazard, I could modify my yard however I wanted. So I found a concept called a bioswale, a shallow, plant-filled ditch designed to retain water. Good for the environment. Loved by municipalities. And, if you played your cards right, perfect for building what I would come to call the swamp trap. But I wasn't going to lay it all out at once. First, I started collecting gear. Garden liners, specialized soil mixes, turf that could sit atop wet ground without showing signs of damage. I even picked up a few frog statues and solar-powered pond lights for camouflage. Meanwhile, Karen kept parking. The rut grew deeper. She rolled her eyes at me whenever I stepped outside. The war had become routine, her abuse, my silence. But what she didn't know was that every night after she went to bed, I was reshaping the land beneath her future disaster. I installed the drainage system myself, hidden pipes that would collect rainwater and funnel it into a chamber below. A custom basin lined with water-absorbing clay that stayed permanently wet. Above that, a layer of engineered soil designed to look firm, but shift subtly under pressure. Then, finally, a top layer of pristine turf. When it was done, it looked better than ever. A bright green welcome mat. Karen wouldn't be able to resist. It only took 2 days of heavy rain. She didn't even hesitate. Same routine, same arrogance. Only this time, her tires hit the soft spot and dropped fast. She tried to back out. Nothing. She revved the engine. The car sank deeper. When I stepped out onto my porch, coffee in hand, it was like watching a nature documentary about prey falling into a bog. She screamed, she cursed, she blamed the HOA me, the weather, and when the tow truck arrived and got stuck right behind her, I knew I had created something beautiful. Something glorious. Something that would echo across this neighborhood for years. But that was just the beginning. Karen had declared war. And I had declared mud. By the next morning, word had spread. The neighborhood group chat lit up with grainy photos of Karen's half-sunken SUV and the tow truck that followed it into the same muddy fate. My lawn had turned into local legend overnight. But while the neighbors chuckled behind closed doors, I knew Karen wouldn't be licking her wounds quietly. She wasn't the kind to retreat. She was the kind to reload. That's why I didn't stop with just a single trap. I doubled down. If Karen wanted war, she was going to get it. But I wasn't about to play dirty. No, everything I planned next would stay delightfully, painfully within the rules. I began cataloging every HOA clause I could find, even the footnote. That's when I found my golden ticket. The Green Sustainability Incentive Program, a provision allowing any homeowner to convert their lawn into an environmentally beneficial design, as long as it adhered to water conservation standards and required no permanent structures. The perfect loophole. With a few landscaping brochures, a fake community ecological initiative flyer, and the right buzzwords like stormwater management and pollinator-friendly ground cover, I submitted my conversion plan. And just like that, my yard officially became a bioswale project, endorsed and stamped by the HOA president, who clearly didn't read past the first page. I went shopping like a man possessed. Truckloads of water-retaining soil, root systems designed to look like natural grasses, and hidden mesh structures that collapsed under concentrated weight. I even found a guy online who specialized in natural-looking landscaping over bogs and wetland simulations. He thought it was a weird art project. I let him think that. I hired a team of landscapers to legitimize the construction, but I handled the core layout myself at night, repositioning the traps, testing the water flow, adjusting soil densities. It wasn't enough to just sink a car. I wanted it to feel like the earth itself was rebelling against her arrogance. Karen, meanwhile, didn't skip a beat. After getting her car towed and cleaned, she returned a few days later, acting like nothing happened. This time, she parked one wheel onto the edge of the lawn, as if daring me to say something. I didn't take the bait. I just waved, smiled, and said I was working on a city-approved project to improve the neighborhood's runoff ecosystem. That seemed to annoy her more than any actual confrontation would have. She narrowed her eyes, muttered something about HOA privileges, and stomped off. But I saw the twitch in her jaw. She knew something was up, she just didn't know what. The next part of the trap was psychological. I started placing little decorative signs in my yard. Wetland in progress, native plants area, do not disturb, and my personal favorite, sod testing zone. I knew she'd scoff at them. She thought I was being dramatic, and in a way, I was. But behind the drama was meticulous planning. I planted switchgrass and soft rushes in strategic places to keep the soil damp. I rerouted part of my downspout system so water would channel into hidden soak pits near the parking edge. To the untrained eye, it looked like quirky landscaping. But underneath, it was a carefully balanced swamp ecosystem, ready to betray any intruder. Things escalated when Karen started talking about forming a beautification committee. She made flyers, posted in the HOA Facebook group, and hinted that some homeowners were letting ugly natural designs ruin the clean look of the neighborhood. Of course, her real target was me. At one point, she came up to my house with a printed list of acceptable garden aesthetics and tried to hand it to me like she was delivering scripture. I asked her politely if her SUV had accepted Jesus as its Lord and Savior after getting baptized in my lawn. She didn't laugh. I did. Despite her efforts to rally the neighborhood against me, most people were either too entertained or too terrified to side with her. The ones who had seen the great SUV submersion firsthand mostly stayed out of it, content to watch the fireworks from a safe distance. But Karen wasn't done. One afternoon, I noticed her pacing the perimeter of my yard with a clipboard, writing things down, taking photos, and muttering into her phone. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was building a case to reverse my HOA approval. But she didn't realize I had every email, every signed form, and a stack of before and after pictures, complete with soil sample data. I documented everything. If she wanted a war of paperwork, she was going to drown in it. One evening, while I was laying new sod panels over a freshly moistened trench, I saw her peeking out from behind her window, watching me like a hawk. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just defending my lawn anymore. This had become performance art. Every rake stroke, every planted seed, every drip of the hose was part of a silent one-man show meant for a single audience member, Karen. And judging by her furrowed brow and clenched jaw, the show was a hit. She made one last attempt to sabotage my progress. Late one night, I caught her tossing gravel across my side of the curb, trying to stabilize the edge with what she called a courtesy improvement. I had a motion-activated trail cam already set up. The footage was gold. Karen in fuzzy slippers, flinging stones across property lines like a gremlin. The next day, I printed out the screenshots and taped them to my mailbox with a smiley face sticker. When she confronted me, red-faced and breathless, I told her I'd be happy to submit the footage to the HOA, just to make sure there was no confusion about boundary lines. She cursed under her breath and stormed off. That was the last time she tried a direct sabotage. But I could tell the battle was far from over. She was regrouping, waiting, watching, and I was ready. By the end of the week, my swamp trap was complete. It wasn't just a mudhole anymore, it was a work of art. A deceptive, beautiful, nature-approved booby trap covered in lush greenery, glowing path lights, and eco-friendly signage. Karen thought she was winning just because she was louder. But she didn't know the ground beneath her pride was getting softer by the hour. And I couldn't wait for her to take the bait again. It happened on a Monday morning, the kind of sleepy weekday where the neighborhood just barely begins to stretch awake. Sprinklers clicked on in rhythmic patterns across the block, kids shuffled lazily toward idling SUVs, and I, like usual, was on my porch with a mug of coffee and a smirk already tugging at my lip. Because I knew what was about to happen. The rain from the weekend had soaked the yard just enough, and the swamp trap was in peak condition. It wasn't just ready, it was hungry. Karen's SUV rounded the corner like clockwork, shiny and smug. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even check the curb. She rolled straight onto the patch she had claimed as her personal driveway for weeks, the same patch that now concealed my masterpiece. The second her front tire touched the surface, I saw it, the smallest bounce, a soft give that only I could appreciate. It was like watching a spiderweb tighten. Then the rear tires followed, and just like that, the trap claimed its prey. The SUV dipped forward with a grunt of metal. Karen didn't notice at first. But when she put the vehicle in park and tried to get out, her door didn't open all the way. The weight had shifted, and the angle was off. She frowned, looked down, and finally saw the front wheels buried nearly 6 inches into the turf. When she hit reverse, the tires only spun. Mud fanned out in all directions. A bird nearby took flight from the noise. She shifted into drive and tried again. This time, the tires slipped deeper, like the earth had grown greedy. Her face changed. Panic flickered behind her tinted windows. She opened the door and tried to step out. Her foot sank into the mud with a sloppy squelch, her heel completely disappearing into the muck. She shrieked. I set my coffee down slowly, savoring the moment like it was the climax of a Broadway show. She was out now, pacing around the car, screaming at the lawn, pointing at the grass like it had conspired against her. Her voice cracked the quiet morning like a car alarm that wouldn't stop. Her phone was out in seconds, fingers jabbing wildly as she yelled for a tow truck and likely a lawyer in the same breath. I stepped down from the porch and approached her with the calm of a man who had planned this outcome to the minute. "Something wrong?" I asked, like I hadn't already microwaved popcorn in anticipation. "This is sabotage," she screeched. "You did this on purpose. My car is sinking. I could sue you." I motioned to the wooden sign right next to her tire, which read "Caution. Wetland area, no vehicles beyond this point." "I warned you," I said gently. "City-approved bioswale. Sustainable. Native plant certified. You turned your lawn into a death trap." "Only for heavy vehicles," I replied. "Perfectly safe for butterflies." She kept yelling, but her audience was growing. Neighbors peeked through windows, a few even ventured out onto their porches. Then, as if summoned by fate's cruel sense of humor, the tow truck arrived. It was a newer model, beefier than the last, and the driver was a young guy with mirrored sunglasses and an eyebrow piercing. He stepped out, took one look at the scene, and sighed. "I'm gonna regret this," he muttered. He backed the truck carefully onto the street, extended the tow cable, and began to winch Karen's SUV. But the second the weight shifted, the front end of the tow truck rolled slightly forward, onto the same disguised patch Karen had claimed. The bog had been softened overnight, the ground still slick from rainfall. The truck's front wheels dipped, and before anyone could stop it, the tow truck joined Karen's SUV in my lawn swamp like a friend diving into a hot tub. I nearly choked on my own laughter. Karen screamed again, louder this time, like she was losing a battle against gravity. The driver cursed under his breath and radioed in for a second vehicle. Now there were two stuck vehicles in my yard, both struggling like stranded turtles, while I leaned against my fence sipping coffee like I was watching Netflix. A crowd had gathered now. People from down the block started walking up, phones out, documenting everything. I could hear snippets of conversation. "Did you see that? She always parks there. This is gold." Karen tried to regain control of the situation by waving her arms like a traffic cop and shouting at people to stop filming. Of course, that only made it worse. One guy whispered that it was going viral already. Another offered to bring a drone. When the second tow truck arrived, a massive dual-axle beast meant for off-road recoveries. It stayed on the road and used an extended pulley system to winch both the SUV and the first truck out one at a time. The mud they left behind was glorious. Tire tracks nearly a foot deep carved a crater into my lawn, and as the trucks rolled off, they sprayed clumps of soil and half-dead grass onto Karen's pant legs. Her white sneakers were unrecognizable. Her rage reached a fever pitch. She marched straight toward me, splattered and shaking. "You will pay for this," she spat. "You're malicious. You're a lunatic. You're obsessed with me." I didn't say a word. I simply held up my phone and played a clip from a few weeks ago, her knocking over my lawn sign and laughing on camera. Then I flipped to a still image of her standing on the curb, hand on hip, telling my neighbor that I should get over it and maybe grow some weeds instead. "You trespassed," I said calmly. "Repeatedly. I asked you not to. You ignored warnings. You damaged property. And you did it in front of multiple witnesses. If anything, I should be the one suing." She opened her mouth but nothing came out. Then she stormed off, leaving muddy footprints on the sidewalk, her car rumbling behind her like a defeated beast. Later that afternoon, the HOA scheduled an emergency meeting. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint that I'd created a hazard on community ground. But when I arrived at the clubhouse with every document, time-stamped approval email, and drone footage of her SUV mid-sink, the tables turned fast. Even the HOA president, normally spineless, couldn't deny what he saw. I reminded them that my landscaping was pre-approved, designed for water retention, and technically improved neighborhood runoff. One of the board members asked, "So, this was all legal?" I smiled. "Every square inch." Karen sat silent in the corner, arms crossed, the glow of her phone's screen dim as a few more neighbors whispered and chuckled. It was clear her influence was crumbling. What she thought was a petty lawn scuffle had turned into a full-blown spectacle. And this was only the beginning. Because I hadn't just embarrassed her. I'd turned her arrogance into a punchline. And punchlines tend to stick around. The days after the double tow truck disaster were strangely quiet. For the first time since Karen had moved in, she didn't park near my lawn. Her SUV vanished from sight, either tucked deep into her driveway or perhaps parked somewhere shameful, like her garage. She didn't knock on my door, didn't scream in the HOA group chat, didn't try to drop off fake citations. For a brief moment, it almost felt like peace had returned. But I didn't trust it. Karen was the type to retreat only when she was cooking something bigger, and sure enough, the silence broke like a thunderclap a few mornings later when I found a small surveillance camera mounted on a lamppost near my property, pointed directly at my yard. It was subtle, cleverly placed, and had a HOA inspection sticker on it. She was trying to build evidence, or, more likely, trying to catch me breaking a rule so she could twist it into her next tantrum. I wasn't fazed. I installed my own camera in response, tucked discreetly into a birdhouse, angled straight at the sidewalk. Not only would it capture her comings and goings, it would also record anyone tampering with the lawn, the signs, or the freshly laid irrigation trench that now doubled as a mud moat along the edges. The trap was evolving. It had become a living, breathing part of my defense system. And it was ready for anything. Karen didn't stop with the camera. That week, she filed multiple minor complaints with the HOA, noise from landscaping equipment, light pollution from my solar path lights, unauthorized wildlife, which I assumed meant the frogs who had taken a liking to the swampy side of the lawn. The best one was her complaint that my yard attracted mosquitoes, which the city inspector later clarified was not only false, but ironically, Karen's birdbath was a larger mosquito breeding site than my entire bioswale. Still, I kept things professional. I attended every HOA meeting, brought documentation for every accusation, and smiled while Karen floundered in bureaucratic quicksand. She was unraveling, and it showed. During one meeting, she tried to accuse me of fraudulently acquiring HOA approval for my swamp. I simply pulled out the printed emails, time-stamped, signed, and verified. The president of the board, now thoroughly exhausted by Karen's vendetta, finally said aloud what everyone was thinking. "Karen, if you just stopped parking on his lawn, none of this would have happened." She stood up, red in the face, muttered something about targeted harassment, and stormed out before the meeting adjourned. But the real turning point came on a windy Thursday night when my trail cam picked up something interesting. At around 11:43 p.m., a figure crept onto my lawn, hood up, a sack slung over one shoulder, and a flashlight in hand. Karen. I recognized the stomp in her walk, the determined anger in her body language. She paused near the corner of the yard and began pouring something into one of the swales, bags of gravel, followed by what looked like powdered cement. Sabotage. I watched the footage twice to make sure. Then I backed it up, stored copies on 3 separate drives, and printed out high-res screenshot. The next morning, I filed a trespassing report with the local authorities and submitted the footage to both the HOA and the city. The city inspector showed up that afternoon, took one look at the gravel dump, and issued a violation notice. Not to me but to Karen, who had illegally modified someone else's permitted landscaping project. Her fine was steep. Her rage even steeper. She marched over that evening with her phone recording, trying to get me to admit that I faked the entire setup just to make her look bad. I didn't say a word. I just looked into the camera and asked, "Is this being live streamed?" She said yes proudly. That's when I showed her the police report number and the citation copy, on camera, like it was a show-and-tell session for adults who never learned boundaries. The livestream, apparently, didn't go how she expected. One of my neighbors sent me the link later. The comments were brutal. People from all over the city chimed in, some mocking, some cheering, some offering to send frog plushies as lawn decor tributes. Karen went quiet again after that, but I knew it was the kind of quiet that builds pressure. She wasn't giving up. I could feel it every time I saw her SUV crawl slowly past my house, eyes watching from behind tinted glass. She was waiting for me to slip up. But I didn't. Instead, I doubled down on the absurdity. I installed a small sign on the edge of the lawn that said, "Beware of Bog Beast. Neighborhood Guardian since 2023. A decorative gnome was placed next to it, holding a mini shovel and wearing a tiny swamp hat. At night, I played frog noises on a loop through a solar-powered Bluetooth speaker hidden under the bushes. Karen stopped driving by after that. Or maybe she just got tired of seeing her war become a joke. At the next HOA meeting, something unexpected happened. A motion was introduced. Not by me, but by another neighbor, suggesting a formal ban on vehicle parking on any lawn throughout the neighborhood, with escalating fines for repeat offenders. The vote was unanimous, except for one abstention. Karen had been removed from the board due to her conflict of interest, and was now simply a regular homeowner with no power to block the vote. She sat 2 rows behind me, still as a statue, while the policy she had inadvertently inspired was cemented into community law. The funny thing was, after all the chaos, my lawn had never looked better. The bioswale was thriving. Birds visited daily. The frogs had become a neighborhood mascot. A local environmental club asked to feature it on their community walk. And my camera footage? It had become part of a viral Reddit post titled, "When Karen Declares War on the Wrong Lawn." The comments section alone was pure gold. But I wasn't done yet. The final move was coming soon. Because Karen had done everything to control, bully, and intimidate, and now it was time for the final performance. One that would leave no doubt who the true winner of this swamp saga was. It started with a flyer. Not one of Karen's usual passive-aggressive HOA bulletins or faux safety warnings, but something that had my signature smirk all over it. I printed 100 copies on bright green paper with a cartoon frog in the top corner, sunglasses on, lounging in a deck chair. The text read, "You're invited to the first annual swamp party. Come see where Karen's SUV learned to swim." Below that, I listed the time, the date, and the location. My front yard, which had now become infamous enough to earn its own footnote in local gossip circles. I didn't hand them out personally. I just let them appear. On mailboxes, in windshields, on the HOA bulletin board Karen used to dominate. They spread faster than I expected. By the afternoon of the event, people began trickling in with lawn chairs, coolers, and stories. Neighbors I barely knew came up to shake my hand, some bringing frog-themed snacks, others just wanting to see the spot where Karen's SUV had met its muddy end. I'd gone all in. Tiki torches surrounded the yard, subtle LED spotlights lit up the swamp garden in soft blues and greens, and a rented fog machine gave the edge of the bioswale a mystic shimmer. I even rented a canoe and placed it upright on the lawn like a monument, with a little plaque underneath that read, "In memory of Karen's front bumper, gone but not forgotten." Kids ran around with rubber boots, splashing the safe edges of the wetland. Someone brought a karaoke setup. Another neighbor brought a foldable drink bar. I didn't expect it to feel like a block party, but somehow, it became exactly that. People talked, laughed, swapped tales of their own Karen encounters from around town. And through it all, I kept one eye on the street. Because I knew she'd show up. She couldn't help herself. She didn't come at first, of course. That wasn't her style. But right as the sun began to dip and the yard glowed with soft golden hues, her SUV crept down the block, slower than usual, as if trying to blend in. She parked 3 houses down, far from the swamp, and emerged in a sour-colored sundress with oversized sunglasses like she was entering hostile territory. She didn't walk straight toward me, though. She wandered the perimeter, clearly scanning for weaknesses. She paused at the sign by the canoe. Her lip curled. Then she spotted the crowd laughing near the frog pond I'd added earlier that week, complete with a motion sensor that triggered a croak every time someone walked past. She froze, hands clenched, and turned on her heel. But I was already walking toward her, drink in hand, wearing a t-shirt that said, "Swamp it like it's hot." I nodded politely. "Glad you could make it." Her jaw tightened. "You've made a mockery of me," she hissed. I raised my eyebrows. "Did I, though? Or did you do that all on your own?" She looked like she wanted to slap me with her handbag, but realized there were too many phones out, too many eyes watching. The cameras were her weakness now, and she knew it. She stormed away without another word, but not before nearly tripping over one of the lawn's shallow pits. The crowd chuckled. One neighbor muttered under his breath, "She's lucky we didn't install alligators." The party continued into the evening. As the music softened and people gathered near the fire pit I'd built on the dry edge of the yard, I made a short speech, not to gloat, but to remind everyone why this had all started. It wasn't just about a ruined lawn. It was about boundaries, respect, the right to live without being trampled, literally and metaphorically, by someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her. I thanked the neighbors for their support and joked that next year's event might feature a swamp-themed obstacle course. The laughter rolled easy and sincere. A few days later, the real finale arrived. A black SUV pulled into Karen's driveway early in the morning. Then another. A woman in business attire stepped out and began placing a "for sale" sign in Karen's yard. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. A few minutes later, Karen herself appeared on the porch, talking quickly to one of the agents and gesturing wildly at the sign. The woman remained professional, handed Karen a clipboard, and pointed toward the paperwork. Karen's hands shook as she signed. I'd never seen her look so defeated. She avoided me entirely for the next few days. No glares, no flybys, no late-night gravel flinging. She vanished like a ghost in her own house. Her curtains stayed drawn. Her SUV stayed parked. By the time the moving truck arrived, no one even waved goodbye. Most people just pretended not to notice. It was the kind of exit Karen would have hated, quiet, uncelebrated, irrelevant. When the house finally emptied out, I walked over one evening and placed something small on the porch, a ceramic frog with sunglasses, the same kind that had become a mascot for my lawn. A farewell gift, a gentle warning to the next owner. The neighborhood had learned something valuable, and it had nothing to do with swamp engineering or HOA politics. It was about standing your ground without losing your mind, about finding humor in the madness, about turning sabotage into celebration. And as I stood there, looking back at my yard, lush, lively, and full of mischief, I couldn't help but smile. Karen had come with chaos. She left with silence. And my swamp, like always, waited patiently for the next entitled tire to cross the line.